We are thrilled today to have with us Tom Junod, an award-winning journalist and author and a proud UAlbany alumnus from the class of 1980. Currently a senior writer with ESPN, specializing in detailed, deep stories, he has also written for GQ and Esquire, where he won 2 National Magazine Awards and was a finalist for the award 11 times. His work in Esquire includes the haunting 9/11 story, The Falling Man, and a story on beloved children's TV host Fred Rogers' Can You Say Hero?, which served as the basis for the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, starring Tom Hanks. In recognition of his talent, Tom has also won the James Beard Award for an essay about his mother's cooking. His work has been widely anthologized in many writing collections, and he received the Alumni Association's 2016 Excellence in Art and Letters Award. UAlbany has had a profound impact on Tom's life. Born and raised in Long Island, he came to UAlbany to major in English and met his wife, Janet, an alumna from the class of 1979. He has spoken at multiple New York State Writers Institute events, participated in our 2020 virtual One UAlbany graduation celebration, and also in 2020 hosted a UAlbany Facebook Live virtual event featuring special guest Joanne Rogers. If you're sensing a theme here, you're correct. While our graduates may be too young to know Mr. Rogers, I'm guessing many of the guests in attendance remember him fondly. Well, you're in for a treat, as Tom Junod is proud to speak today about his friendship with and the legacy of Fred Rogers. Tom?
Oh. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Dr. Kim. And can I just say, wow. It really is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Greetings from me to everybody, to the happy and hopeful and relieved graduates, to the proud parents, wonderful professors, dedicated administrators, distinguished alumni, child prodigies, late bloomers of the future, and all assorted Great Danes. Thanks so much for having me here today. It means so much to have been sitting amongst you and to be standing here right now. I want to start with a dedication. This speech is dedicated to my wife, Janet Folk, class of 1979, whom I followed to this great institution, and to the memory of Amy Kluglein-Klein, also class of 79 and a great friend to many. I'm so honored to be here. A long time ago, I sat where you sat, looking at the guy on the stage, proposing to give us one last bit of wisdom before we started our lives. A finishing touch, maybe, to the education we'd already worked so hard to get. Yeah, I remember that guy. No, I don't. I have no memory of who he was or what he said. But today, I finally might have a pretty good idea of what he was thinking. You guys are freaking me out a little bit. There's a lot of you. So let me forego the grand pronouncements and let me tell you the story of how I got from there to here. But first I have to say something at the beginning that I want you to remember for the end. Once an English major, always an English major, so I have to indulge in a little bit of foreshadowing. A minute is a long time. I'll say it again, a minute is a long time. Okay, now on to the story. I've been a journalist for more than 30 years, and in that time I've been fortunate enough to have written some stories that people keep reading, and I've also spent quality time with a lot of famous people. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, George Clooney, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Mike Tyson, Elon Musk, Nicole Kidman, Tom Hanks. I've even had a movie loosely based on my life. But that's not how I got started. Back when I attended the U, I dreamed of being a writer. But since I was an English major, I got started as a handbag salesman. I was the same age that many of you are now. I was 22. I was given a car, some sample cases, and a territory, the American Southwest, that was nearly a third of the country. 5 or 6 days a week, I got in that car and I sold ladies' handbags to stores. Oh, sure, I still wanted to be a writer. I wrote at night in hotel rooms. But I have to be honest, my father was a handbag salesman, my brother was a handbag salesman. I very well might have stayed a handbag salesman. But then something happened. I was staying at a crummy hotel in Los Angeles with a couple of other salesmen. I went out to dinner, and when I came back to the hotel, I got on the elevator with a guy who was sweating profusely. I pressed 2, he pressed 3, but when I went to my room on the second floor and was trying to open the door, the sweaty guy on who I saw on the elevator appeared over my shoulder. I was such a little lamb that I didn't even know what a wolf looked like. And this wolf had come down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd because he figured that I was an easy mark. He was right behind me, a foot away. But here's the thing, the door to my room wouldn't open. The key went into the lock, but I couldn't turn it. So I went down the hall to where another salesman was staying. The sweaty guy disappeared, or so I thought, and I started hanging out and partying with my colleague. I was so clueless and careless, I didn't bother locking or even closing the door to the hallway all the way. So when I got up for a bathroom break, I feel the unmistakable sensation of a gun to my head. A big gun. It's the sweaty guy from the elevator, and now I know what a wolf looks like. He winds up staying in the room for about 45 minutes, threatening us and trying to find money. He explains he's a junkie, but that's not a lot of comfort when he points the gun at our heads and tells us to crawl to the bathroom with our noses on the floor, and then orders us into the bathtub. It's not a lot of comfort when my friend starts crying and begging for his life. My friend is Jewish, but here's what he says. "Oh, dear sweet Jesus, don't kill us." And here's what the wolf says. "Don't you start taking the Lord's name in vain. I'm a God-fearing blankety blank myself." And then he left. The police came, and I went down the hall back to my own room. I turned the key, and the door that was so stubbornly locked with the wolf at my shoulder opened right up, and I walked right in. I have no idea what happened that night, why the door wouldn't open when I was in great danger, or why he didn't kill us when he clearly had it on his mind. The one thing I know with complete confidence and complete certainty is that if that door opened with him at my shoulder, he would have pushed me into our room alone, and I would not be standing here in front of you right now and telling this story. That's all. But I am telling you the story because when that door opened for me, I knew I had either survived when I wasn't supposed to, or I had survived because I was supposed to. And in that blink of an eye or turn of a key, I wasn't a handbag salesman anymore. I was someone with a story. And when I got home, I eventually wrote that story on my trusty electric typewriter. I had written before, but this time I had a story of my own, a story to tell, and I wrote it for and as myself. And that made all the difference. I found my story, and at the same time, I found my voice. But this is not the story of an overnight sensation. This is the story, as you might have guessed, of a determined late bloomer. I didn't sell the story I wrote and become a big-time journalist. I was so unprepared for my eventual career that I didn't even try to sell the story I wrote. In fact, I didn't get a real journalism job until I was turning 30. But once I got started as a journalist, I became a certain kind of journalist. A journalist who didn't want to go back to selling handbags. Which is to say, I became a controversial journalist, even a notorious one. I took pride in pushing stories too far, in saying things I wasn't supposed to say, giving myself permission to say the things the people I was writing about didn't want me to say. I was edgy, you see. And although I never ran out of things to write about, I did begin to run out of people who trusted me. And then something happened to me again when I was turning 40. I was working for Esquire magazine, at the time, and for a special issue about American heroes, I was assigned to write about Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers, as he was known to millions of preschool viewers. Did I think Mr. Rogers was an American hero? I did not. I thought he was a little weird, to tell you the truth. He spent his whole life zipping up his cardigan sweater and talking to little kids. People made fun of him. I made fun of him. But Fred Rogers had superpowers. He had the power to talk to adults like children and to talk to children like adults. And as soon as he met people, he not only knew what they needed, he went about the task of giving it to them. He knew right away that I had stopped trusting myself. He knew that I needed to be trusted. And so, against the advice of his advisors, he trusted me. A lot of people you talk to will try to show you the good in themselves. Fred Rogers tried to show me the good in myself. And he became my friend, and he changed my life. I'm in my 60s now. I'm still a journalist. I still specialize in difficult and sometimes painful stories. So I'm not exactly the person you want to see at your door. But I worked very hard to win the trust of people, and I work even harder to live up to their trust. And so fate has turned me into something, or maybe Fred Rogers has turned me into something that I've never expected to be. I've become a person people tell things to. I've become a person whom people tell the things that change them, the things that define and redefine them, the things that are absolutely central to who they are, sometimes even things that they've never told another living soul. And this has become my job and how I make my living. People tell me the things that are most important to them. I listen to them, and they become important to me. And then I try to make those things important to you. Their stories. But why should they be? I don't mean the stories I write for ESPN or the story I've been struggling to tell in a book for the last 5 years. I mean stories in general. Now, I happen to think that people's stories, their beginning, their middles, and their ends, are their most precious and sacred possessions. But of course I think that way. It's my job. The question is why those stories should be important to you. They're a dime a dozen, after all. Everybody's got one, so what's the big deal? Well, I have an answer for that, and with any luck, it will help you understand why I think what I've learned in my rather specialized career as a journalist is relevant to the lives that you are planning to lead as chemists, carpenters, accountants, lawyers, computer scientists, nurses, doctors, bankers, teachers, plumbers, diplomats, entrepreneurs, or handbag salesmen. Why my story is worth telling. And the answer, of course, comes in the form of a story. It always does. I recently wrote an article for ESPN about something that took place 4 decades ago. There was a sexual predator who played for a very big college football program, and because he played for a very big college football program, the story of his crimes had gone completely untold. He attacked women who were mostly around your age, in their early 20s. They were in their 60s now and had lived with the memory of the attacks their whole lives. But when my colleague, the great investigative reporter Paula Levine, called the woman who first brought charges against this player, she was able to tell what happened to her as precisely as she did when she took the stand and gave her testimony so long ago. Her name was Bessie Saylor, and in addition to telling Paula the details of the attack, she was able to tell Paula a story. She lived in isolation after testifying. Football players catcalled her as she walked across campus. One night, there was a knock on the door of her dorm room. She opened it, and the biggest man that she had ever seen, another football player, one who would wind up playing 13 years in the NFL, extended his hand to her. He said, "My name is Irv Pankey. I saw you in court the other day, and I want to tell you I believe every word you said. You will never have to be alone on this campus again. Everywhere you go, I will go with you. and I will protect you. I have never been able to hear or tell that story without getting goosebumps. I have goosebumps now because this story captures, to me, the importance of all stories. Stories are important because they're a dime a dozen. Stories are important because everybody has one. Stories are important because they make the same elemental promise that Irv Pankey did to Betsy Saylor. He heard her story in court and he said, "I believe you." He knocked on her door and said, "You are not alone." I believe you. You are not alone. There are no more powerful words in our language either to speak or to hear than those. And they are the words that make stories so important. Stories are what let us know that our lives can change. They are what let us know that we can change lives in turn. I'm not telling you my story because I'm a journalist. I'm telling you my story because I'm a human being. I'm up here telling you my story because I want you to know that each one of you has one too. And that if it doesn't already, one day your story will include the moments that changed your life. Moments of truth, literally. But here's the thing. You can't just tell your story. You have to learn to listen. Now, I have a daughter who's a senior in high school, so I am well aware that no generation in human history has had to listen to as much stuff as you do. That in each of your pockets is a device in which an infinity of voices is telling you to listen to this, watch this, listen to this, watch this. Your every waking hour and your every sleeping hour too. But that's not the kind of listening I mean. The kind of listening I mean involves those moments when you realize that you are not the only one telling your story, that your story is also being told. You see, you are all in sacred possession of your stories, but you are not in possession of your beginnings, your middles, and your endings, especially your endings. The universe that made you, that decided when and where you were born, the color of your skin and eyes and hair, your shoe size, never stops making you. And so every so often you will hear from it, every so often it will give you a nudge. I'm not trying to get religious here. I'm certainly not being metaphorical. I'm being literal. And I suspect you know what I'm talking about. That times you dreamed of an old friend and the next morning that friend is on the phone saying they miss you. The time you were wondering whether to walk away from a romance and the song that started your romance comes on in the supermarket while you're buying the hell with it beer. The door that should have opened and didn't, the door that should have opened and did, the stranger who knocks on your door and says, "I believe you," the person who says, "I trust you," the story you hear that lets you know that you are not alone. The world we all live in is stranger than you know, and there are many things that happen to you that you will never be able to explain. That doesn't necessarily make them meaningful, but that doesn't make them meaningless either. You have to respect them. And that's why being able to listen not just to your own story, but for your own story is so important. I can tell when the story I'm writing is going well because suddenly I see and hear pieces of it everywhere, and everything I see and hear gives me hints about where to go next. When I started writing this speech, for instance, my daughter, Nia, was upstairs playing music. She never plays music I like. But that morning, I heard that Tears for Fears songs I've always loved no matter how many times I hear it, that song that begins with the line, "Welcome to your life." And I was like, that's a great line for a commencement speech. Maybe I should use it. So you see, if you learn to listen, you will learn your story. If you learn your story, you will learn to listen. And how do you know that you're listening to something you're supposed to hear, something that might be more useful to you than someone on Instagram telling you that you're awesome, or someone on Twitter telling you you suck? Goosebumps. Chills. The hair standing up on your arms or on your neck. Those are the things your body does that lets your mind know that you've just heard or seen or read something important. You can't make them happen, You can't stop them from happening. They are you. And if you find yourself leading a light without goosebumps, that's the surest sign that you're not doing it right. It was Fred Rogers who taught me about the unimpeachable honesty of goosebumps. It was Fred Rogers who said, of the strange turns that life takes, you just never know. And it was Fred Rogers who helped me learn how to listen for what's important. I've asked you this morning to listen to the universe, to listen to dreams and accidents and random events, to listen to the stories entrusted to you, to listen to the knock on the door and the door that wouldn't open. But Fred asked for something else. He asked us to listen to ourselves, to listen to the best of ourselves. He even did it on stage in commencement speeches. Graduates, parents, professors, administrators, alumni, and assorted Great Danes. Each of you has a story, and the story is this. You are all here because somebody loved you. You are all here because somebody cared enough about you to bring you to this moment in your life. I've talked a lot about Fred Rogers over the last few years, but I've never tried to do anything he did because he was one of a kind, and I didn't think that I had the authority to. But you've given me the authority by asking me to speak to you, and so I'm going to ask you to listen to yourself right now. I'm going to ask you to think of the people who got you here. I'm going to ask you to take a minute and to think of those who, in Fred's words, loved you into being. I'll count. Of course, my iPhone didn't work for the counting, but I thank you for doing that. This year, Betsy Saylor and Irv Pankey, in their mid-60s, were reunited. They met each other for the first time in 43 years, and they fell in love. You just never know. You never know who you are reaching out to when you tell your story. You never know who is reaching out to you when they tell theirs. A minute is a long time. A lifetime is very short. Goosebumps never lie. You are not alone. Welcome to your life. Thanks, guys.